right,
Okay,
go.
so Luisa was explaining what led up to her taking ayahuasca. The circumstances that led up to it involved her husband being lost in the forest. She didn't know where he was or if he would return. He, in fact, had been on an expedition with some Ecuadorian soldiers to go to Peru and check on the outposts and to check for supplies and rations. The Peruvians invited them to cross the border and drink beer together, and the Ecuadorians did, although most of them didn't want to. Their teniente insisted, and while they were drinking beer with the Peruvians, some of them disabled their outboard motors on their canoes, and then when the Ecuadorians tried to leave in those canoes, the Peruvians started firing at them. So the men all ran into the forest, and they ended up being lost in the forest for about 2 months. So she's telling the story about how they survived being lost in the forest for 2 months. It turned out that they had actually stored a few things in the forest. They had stored a blowgun, some matches, and a lighter, and so that helped them. When they were running away from the Peruvians, they actually got to the place where they had stored some things, and they were actually able to use those things to, to find food, to find meat, and to find water. And so she drank ayahuasca. She didn't know all this was happening, and she wanted to know if, in fact, he was ever going to come back. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Llega de kiche ulishan. Paigona va teniente ta chaupi wasisha sakishkam. Ishka ipura sakirina. Teniente isho. Paigona kim sapora shisham naura alpatan. Yailia wanchi tupu ikasha vita. Wasisha churasha. Kamisita ruyak talata nasha. Maskara kasperuyata. Somma vingra mashat. Shinkian kilkashashi. Churashka unapai maskasha abi urikuchumisha. Chinarashaga pulaya y ñambisha churashkauna. Chaybes kilkasha churashkauna. Chasarasha paiguna. Kilkashkauna mashti carbongon. O sea, shinkiwan, nina shinkiwan. Kaybisa kirina un paiguna nisha. Ñukanchi kimsaga ñarinchi minisha rishka. Chegarisha ña chay kilkasakishka. Aviunga ña yachashkauna. Yakutamaskashkauna manatopashkauna. Kutisham pangaramata kargata montonasha rupachkauna kushnichishkauna ikin. Kushnichik pichi kushnitari kusha motorga ña ishka ikilla topashkauna. Ña wañukunata ña raikayo wañu. Kasna alkuwawa shara shupatogo alkuwawa. Chita wanchishkauna kusashkauna mikushkauna sakirikuna teniente.
So the great irony is that this teniente, who insisted that everybody go across the border, even though his men didn't want to, he actually couldn't go very far with the men, and he had to say, just leave me here, you guys save yourselves, I'll stay behind with this dog and this other man. And then the other men went off in the forest to try to find their way back home. Well, when the other men finally did get rescued, they were reunited with this teniente, and it turned out that the teniente and this man had actually eaten their dog to stay alive. And so the other men are just horrified at this. But they were rescued because they found them, they managed to find their way to a beach along the river. On the Konanaku River. And they lit fires, they sent up billows and clouds of smoke, hoping that an airplane would fly overhead and see them. And an airplane did in fact see the smoke, so it sent a canoe to rescue them. After 2 months of being lost in the forest, they heard this. Imagínate motor, motor uyareira.
Nyaupa avion topashka. Paiguna kushnichishka na pangata montonacha.
Chitari marani, pero
chigari kungi chitari kusha paiguna ga motoruan. Sukta motor entero raikushkauna. Nya makana kungawa.
6 motorboats
makana
were sent
kungawa
back to look for the
peruano
men.
gunawan nya wanyuna kungawa. Chigari rikusha chari riurauna maskasha. Rikupiga chi painaga kilkasha churashkauna ruya kamisitata mashtishaga pulayay kilkashkauna kaibisa kirinonish. Awais sakishkauna pai avion rikuchunisha. Chiganya shayarik shamushkauna. Ishka ikilla washanya seirishka wanyunkun.
They were almost dead by the time they were found, and they took off their clothes. They took the burnings from their fire that they were able to make, and they made symbols on the beach so that somebody could tell that there were people there. And then finally, when they heard the sound of the motor, at first they thought it was Peruvians coming, and then they realized they recognized some of the soldiers in the canoe coming after them as their fellow countrymen, and so they knew they were safe.
Cool.
So
Чига пайгунага нямбиляришкавна. 8 días tamana tupashkavna yakota. Mana tupasha. Ня, никако засланюшкавна кимцаревкунага няманукина товшеча маимана. Часайши тамяра, урунгуша, якловата, ундачише шукинава. Райкайга, ня чивавай шесириринавра, нямана пурина тушаша.
at one point they went 8 days without finding any water, and finally, when it rained, they took leaves and turned them into cups so that they could catch the rainwater and drink.
Wow.
Чига часарasha, аришкавна. Чиши компания гуна, пайтима пунджара руяс каснашара. Чай биши компанияга пуригашкавна айбе. Чига чай укуи, рикупи вера лата, сардинум. Мукудашка гунаташи, паскаша микуна. Верата и чуша, якуи маиляша, латата паришкавна. Апаряша муша, шамушкавна. Часаша никакута.
They even found things that had been left behind by a company that had once worked in the rainforest and left canned goods, plastic bottles of oil. They dumped everything. With some of the moldy food they actually ate because they were so starving. In some cases they just dumped the contents of the cans, washed them out, rinsed them out, and then used them for containers of water.
Чигарике пайгунага. Italia shiriushkavna, rikopero mukuchiguna punyu shkavachi. Sakin, chitaga. Chitash, mana chitasha, mastishaga. Kaspita pitisha. Arkashkavna paiguna, diustariko. Punyu shatse. Wakshka kalpauta, chaileita, vanchishkavna. Imandayano shamikungavna, yakubilam. Ринаура ришкавна, па маскашкавна, токой маскашкари купитору якуава канюм шашкара. Ня чай бипа, сириши шукти. Чай танда, ломукучи чава, паришка шамуру. Чита янда та топаша, чай билата и чураша, ломукучита янда та маштишага, урупачиша, янушкавна, микушкавна, латай, януша шкавна. Микуй пасак, Paigunachi, maita cochashara. Nya casa shikuyurira kucha. Casa alpai, puñuchkavna shichay. Chiga casa kuyurikti. Yailan shi. Yaku partitari mata, yailan tut. Yaya justari perdonar a palua, simapuma. Paktachkavna chay bishitia shalya pagarishkavna. Pagarisha, balsa tarashkavna. Miku y pasasha lono kuchita vin mikushkavasha. Paina puñuga, chimbagrisha, balsasha, mastivi dondoa, chimbasha, urku, shashkachay, rikupyashiwa muyuga, shinkishinalla shipukushka, chay tapashaga, kunochisha, karandishi mikushka, chiga sikukta arkarisha, kapariura shiperiska, allabaksha muichinishi kapariura.
Ramusuyuan.
Mana, shiwamuyu, karata mikusha.
So, they actually found some lomokuchis in the forest that were sleeping, and they took the blowguns and they hit them on the nose to kill them. They didn't even try to, they were trying to be very quiet so that they wouldn't run away. So they hit them on the nose with a blowgun. But then they had nothing to cook them with because they had no water. So they hoisted them on their backs and they kept going around looking for water. They finally found some. They roasted them. They needed water so they could clean the animals, clean the guts and everything. So they finally did find some water, and they managed to eat the lomokuchis, which is a forest pig. But they had no seasoning, no salt. They had to eat it without anything, without any spices or anything. And then they built a balsa boat. They crossed a river to get to the shore where they were eventually rescued. So we're kind of going back and forth chronologically. And then Shiwamuyu. So they found a Shiwamuyu tree, which is a type of fruit. People do eat Shiwamuyu. And they were so starving that they had to eat a lot of these Shiwamuyu, with the result that they became extremely constipated.
Oh no, really?
And so one man actually called out that he was so constipated, he actually begged his fellow countrymen to dig him out. He was that badly constipated.
Chega alyawa ichinikiga alyangawa rishkona. Arikupiga marunka zapishaga. Nyapai tapishanishaga leng. Paiga kaima kapari use kuktar karisha. Nyapai tapishanisha. Salta sharika Garciaga. Kungai chau pitishka. Pitishka nya chaile yamarun sirishka.
So this man.
Chitaga chiu 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 shapasha. Nuka kusamarun damiku.
So,
Kichish.
so as this man was waiting for somebody to come and irrigate him, his fellow countrymen who came to do that process noticed that an anaconda was swimming in the river, coming up to him, getting ready to grab him, really.
Wow.
And so he took the stick that he was going to use to irrigate him. He hit the anaconda on the head. They hauled it out of the water, and they roasted it, and they ate it.
Wow,
Which
nice.
is a really unbelievable thing because it's very taboo. I mean,
Oh,
most
yeah.
people don't eat anaconda meat at all.
Huh.
But her husband, they ate it to
I
stay
had to,
alive.
Yeah. So Luisa,
Kaya partishaga. Mata.
if you didn't know that all this was going on, you said you took ayahuasca to find out what was happening. Were you able to discover what was happening by taking the ayahuasca?
Kang, imagínate ya charangi,
Ayahuasca
kamba kuso nya chingarishka ma.
Nya paiba.
Ishkai kilya raigo.
Nyuka kachun komunikara kai puyu gumanda.
Shimen kaita tapunata muna. Luisa, imagina kai ayahuasca ta upisha.
Inda kono yang.
Kuting nya kiking ya charangi, imagina ta pasara kamba kusa.
Nya,
Kai ayahuasca ta nya.
Rikungu pingarau ni nyuka.
Now she's going to tell you about the drinking of it.
Amarunda mikushka. Mikushka e motor uyari mushka. Nikupia orai manda shuyari mushka sacha imanu yashka. Konan peruano wanyu chatukungaron chinche yutala isika shari kupi. Wandila rosanishka nigru chara maneja sharishka. Sundaluga tak shuppi gabala muila. Chasa shishamushka na tigra shishamushka na nyateniente tatopasha paina anakta mirina oranikti.
At first they thought that it might be the Peruvians coming to get him again when they heard the motors. They thought the Peruvians were going to come and get him again, so they climbed up the Shiwa tree to see who was coming. And they knew it was their people because they recognized one black man named Andilla, who everybody knew because he was the only black man in their group. And so once they saw him, they knew they were saved. Chiga?
Chega chasarashe. Chi shiriksina vrawandila rosata. Chega veu. Aishika parina vra. Amarun chakichishka markalya paibakara takilyo tashinarasha. Kau. Nya amarun aichaga bagari aichishina shi chakichik pichayasha. Chitimata. Upinaya ishika zivanyuna. Chega uchi wandila rosa pasaushka silvashkaga. Kasa shuyashka motor tawanyu chisha. Motor ga kikin. Sukta noga vashama mana pies uyana chuyari mo. Ay kosha ay wana tishka ichai. Silvak penya shishaya rikshamishka. Chega kaibe mauchinishka nella chapaga bien tonto likirishka chasnalla punyusha. Sanguruas lyaki upishka nyallashti manya.
They were in such a pathetic state. They were completely covered with bites. Their clothes were in tatters. They were thin. They were sick. They were almost dead when they were down.
Yang lachapa. Chega chasnai. Wanyushka shi, nyukawawa shi wanyushka, peruano shi wanchishka nishapa, yaya wakawara pai, pani wakawara montalpo. Nyuka pishkaya sakiri mani, chukila ya pai wamavishka sakiri wani. Lira ni nyuka wasita, nyuka yaya wasita. Rishka nyukachi ga ayakto piushka. Yarisha chasna minena unisha pokusha kuwa inirani.
So her husband, she and her husband had only been together for 1 month when all this happened. So she went to her husband's father and her husband's sister both told her that he was dead. So she decided to go to her kamba yaya u apa yaya ayahuasca.
Nyuka achi.
Her uncle was drinking ayahuasca, and so she decided at that point to drink some to find out what had happened. She manda imata pasada.
Ayahuasca toperani, sirto chuanish, wanyush kang nisha rikungawa. Sirto chang nisha. Ayak toperani. Ayak topisha macha chiwara. Ninyo kachi wairachi wara wairachi gashan. Sinji tachumacha chingni pinda ya nyerani. Achi nyerani wanchika nyena wa ambikamba serikungi nyerani. Ambikamba seriku kangla tarikungi nyara. Rikokpiga. Manduru onta. Waramachishka shina kausa kapuka rikurimu. Shamu kanyuka chango koigani tak. Iyarikshamna. Mana wanyushka chashkara. Tutamanda rirani. Yanga wakangichi nyerani. Yanga yanata churaringichi nyerani. Kausaumi. Shamunga mirau. Felicitawara paichuri paktamupi. Oshiawara. Inda. Chiviri kurani nyuka posa shamu. Chasari kuchimang ayahuasca.
Chapa. So when she went to her uncle, he gave her the ayahuasca. It took hold, and she said she definitely had these questions in her mind. She said, I'm taking this because I want to know for sure. Is he dead? Is it true what they say? Or is he not dead? So once the ayahuasca took hold, she asked her uncle again, is it true? Is he dead or is he not dead? And her uncle said, look. And so she saw him come to her, sit down next to her. He was the color of the manduru flower, which is red, which is a symbol of life. And she knew right then and there that he was not dead. She could see him in this vision. He looked alive, he looked well. In another version of this story that she told me, she said that he actually spoke to her saying, I'm lost in the forest, but I'm coming back. I'm finding my way home.
Cool.
And so after that was all over, she went and she told her father-in-law and her sister-in-law, you guys are crying uselessly. He's not dead, he's coming back. So the ayahuasca definitely gave her the answer she was
Nice.
trying to find. Yeah.
Good.
Chikiri waganawra. Certo mashkenchi. Nyapai paktamura riki.
And he came. And so she was a believer.
Pasaktari kushkara ninyo kashamu. Rikorani kausaktara. Chay bayak to pishkani. Chi upishkamanda kunanga mama no piche.
Hunan.
Kunanga.
Chi upishkamanda mana upikchan.
Mana piche.
From that time she has not had any more. Imawa.
No more.
Imawa.
Nya sakirani nya nyuka mana pirani. Nya sakishikamani nya sakishika.
She has given it up forever. But it's not completely clear why.
Pasaktari kunamang pisha. Kunang gabe.
Did you want her to say something?
Sure. Yeah. So, Todd told me that you know some Ikaros.
Ikarana
Ikarata chumunang pai.
Ikarata
Nya.
Mimunang
A ver. Suma tamari. Nyuka ikaranya mariri. Ima ikarawas wanyui ikarawas nyuka ikara. Nyuka yachai ikaranya mariri. Kanga nyuka taga mana chuyari. Manja shala nyuka wawataga pula shala niwangi chuyari ya. Nyuka yachai biruti la mangyari. Yana biruti was nyuka yachai biruti la mangya. Ima ruyang biruti was ya. Nyuka yachai biruti la mariri. Nyuka yachai biruti la mangyari. Ima royang biruti was nyuka yachai biruti la mariri. Kanga nyuka talama na chuyari. Manja wangi nyuka yachai lami ang yari. Nyuka wawatala kang kulasya. May kocha ukui tiarish katas chayla tata puku mungi rona wawa mairi. May pangakalo ukui sirirish kata. Nyuka wawatala kang shita shala sirirish kata wasya. Chayla tata puku mungi rona wawa mairi. Ima tawas nyuka wanyui tawas kay machima puko munggiro na wawa maririri imakang isupulyo ako'y siririskata chayla tata puko munggiro na wawa maririri may pinyasok to ako'y siririskata chayla tata picha munggiro na wawa maririri may atong kutsa ako'y siririskata chayla tata puko munggiro na wawa maririri toko'y mundo ikaralawas nyuka ikarala maririri nyuka taga kangama na chuyari manja sacho nyuka wawa taga pulawangi nyuka kalyaris pagayari yana berotiwang sikuk tulamanda pasak tami shita shayari ima kilo ispabirotiwam ama nyuka wawa taga kila chipangi chuyari chayla tata tuksi munggiro na wawa maririri toko'y berotila toko'y ikarala nyuka yachay ikarala maririri re 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 may kutsa uku atong kutsa uku mandapay kutsa negro shitas katas nyuka yachay karala maririri pay yakuwawa uku tala pay serigris kata may totorala uku tawasyari chayla tata puko munggiro na wawa maririri re 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 kang may yakuwawa umawi sirirish kata wasya chayla tata ikaramuro na wawa maririri may kang kausagro ya uktuwi kang yaykush kata wasya chayla tata puko munggiro na wawa maririri re 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 chayla tata ikaramuro na wawa maririri ima wanyuy ikarawas nyuka yachay ikarala maririri re 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 chimang ikara
Ikara.
ikara
Just
pukuna
pagratio. So, is there a name to the song, or what is it about? Can she tell me anything about it?
Oh my gosh.
Is it
It
too
is
much?
so complex. It's so
Really?
full of images, and it's really only half understandable.
Okay.
There are actual words and phrases that we can translate, but the rest of it is not meant to be
Right.
understandable because it's like a variety of a shaman's takina. Takina shine manachu.
ikara
Ikara.
Ikara.
Mana kikin uyaipachu. Kantan manachu. So it's not really meant to be understandable, but there are definite images. There's image of white darts and black darts. And at one point she said, she talked about, don't you bother my children. It's a song that almost sounds like it's meant to protect people. But it's also evoking images. Kayangichu supaita kai ikarawa
mana likongi
pichangichu
likongi nyukanchita mai sacha mai yakui nyukanchiwawa ba amarun shita puina ishpato chivi nyukanchi paita manja chichi nyukaranji
kantowan.
kai katakiwa kai ikarawa nyukawawa tama puglangichu nyuka kalyarishaga yanga birutiwan ruyak birutiwan kilyo birutiwan nyukaga mbawawata pasak tami kachashkan yama nyukataga kilyachiwan bichu Marong katamanja mo. Punda siya mas kay min tawakaran yung katamanja siya pa chitayacha.
So she's saying, you know, if your children are out and about and they're wandering in the forest, it may be that some spirit is tempted to try to do something to them, which would cause them to get really sick. And the way she describes this would be queen, ishpa. So that's kind of like a cycle of sickness where you vomit, you have diarrhea, queen, ishpa. You just become very debilitated and weak. And that can happen to children all the time. But when it happens, people interpret it as the result of a bad energy or a bad supai or a bad spirit. And so what this song is meant to do is it's meant to scare away any evil intending being that would do something to her child. And that's why she said, Amakilya chingi mawata. That was one of the things she said during the song.
So this song can be used at any time and not just during an ayahuasca ceremony, for
Correct.
example. Okay.
Kai kantote kantasha niya waskata upingichu ulimpita
Limpimit
kantani.
nyukawa. Ayahuasca wambas kayari ga nyukupigarani chivivas.
Pero
Konanga limpivi takini nyukawa.
cierto. She said you can sing it under the influence of ayahuasca, but she says you can also sing it. She uses the word limpi from Spanish limpiar. She said limpi. She can sing it without being under the influence of anything,
Sober.
and that it will still work. Yeah.
So can she define then this word ikaro for me that I've heard so much? Is it how would she define it?
Imata ikarana.
Ikara yacha. Nyuka
Knowledge.
Oh yeah.
Knowledge.
Oh, okay.
Vai yachasha. Chikarata yachasha. Mai wawa wanyupi. Basti imamankai. Kuina ispa tokusha mai makusha.
Kuina ishpa.
Tokukti imashimaki. Tawa kota kaita pukunga. Pukushka washa, taiga corona manda pukunga, maki manda pukunga, chaki manda pukunga, chiwasha mi limpianga bien, roko api wawa, pai ambinga. Nyuka masanta chaya chachiuni.
Chimande kantangi.
Che a ikarata, kaimang ikara nyukanche.
Pita yachachera.
Nyukatawa, nyuka mikia tapira, mas achibinan sunishka peruano manda. Pai chachiwana, chimanda mikia, nyuka mikia ilumina yachachiwa.
So somebody taught her this song. It was her aunt's husband from Peru who taught her how to use this song.
Okay.
So for her, ikarana is a type of curing song. It's a type of curing song. It's like there's